Had a certain gentleman behind the desk, that beautiful, resolute desk in the Oval Office. What was his name? His name was Trump, happened to be Trump. But it was all of you, actually. In a certain sense, you were all sitting behind that desk.
So, in a certain sense, you're all in a lot of trouble for what you did. Behind that desk, 91 charges. Woo! What were you thinking? Taking those classified documents. And don't get me started on your family life. You never remembered Eric's birthday. So, in a certain sense, you're the terrible dad, not me.
Just 3 days after a jury ordered Rudy Giuliani to pay $148 million in a defamation suit, two former Georgia election workers have filed a new lawsuit against the former Trump lawyer. The new complaint filed by Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss focuses on comments Giuliani made about them both during and after the civil trial. Listen as Giuliani doubles down and continues to push lies, false election theories from outside the courtroom just last week.
Whatever happened to them, it's unfortunate if other people overreacted, but everything I said about them is true.
Do you regret what you did to Ruby?
Of course
Freeman?
I don't regret it. I told the truth. They were engaged in changing votes.
There's no proof of that.
Oh, you're damn right there is. Stay tuned.
Oh, my God.
His guy is trying desperately.
They're trying so hard.
Trying desperately
to get him
away from the microphone.
And stop lying.
And stop blowing himself up.
But he did. In their latest complaint, attorneys for Freeman and Moss write that when they asked Giuliani to stop lying, he refused to do so. Quote, defendant Giuliani's statements coupled with his refusal to agree to refrain from continuing to make such statements make clear that he intends to persist in his campaign of targeted defamation and harassment. It must stop. The new lawsuit doesn't specifically ask for money. Lawyers are looking for a targeted injunction that would bar Giuliani from repeating his damaging, debunked claims about the poll workers. A spokesperson for Giuliani did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And Joe, we know how hard it is to get lies to stop rolling around on the internet or on Twitter and situations that you've had yourself with Trump and myself as well. Imagine these two women, their lives were turned upside down. They were getting threats. They couldn't walk into a bakery without getting yelled at by people because of Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. And he doesn't give a damn. He continues. Even after losing and it being proven that he was lying about them, he continues to hurt people. He continues to hurt these specific two innocent women who are public servants who are working to help with the local elections. He wants to hurt them. He wants them to have pain. These two women, like, who would support a president and his, quote, attorney, a former president running for office, who wants to just indiscriminately hurt people for fun?
Well, the thing is, it destroy their lives.
Correct.
You talk about, I mean, we certainly understand the consequences. We're in a good position. We're in a better position to take care of ourselves.
Well, we have chosen this position.
These two women who didn't choose
to
be in this position and don't have the support that others may have, those two women were not even able to stay in their own homes. And again, I have people that sent me after Rudy Giuliani spread those lies in 2000, was it, I guess, early 2000, whenever it was, I guess late 2000, were all sending me questions. What about those women that stole votes?
They are standing up for the truth. Ruby Freeman, Shaye Moss, I have so much respect for you. I'm so grateful for you because the truth is part of what's at stake here in this election, and they are standing up for it. And I'm sorry, they are not people who chose to be in the public eye, who chose to take on something as big as this, and they are doing it.
And Rudy Giuliani, whatever he thinks he's proving, he's hurting himself, first of all, every time he steps behind that microphone and lies. But to make his bigger point, every time he does that, he makes their life more dangerous, and he doesn't give a damn. And the question is, who are these people? How were they raised to be so absolutely vacant and void of any compassion for these women, that when they spread these lies just for the hell of it and act indignant? Stupid people across America, stupid people that will look at TikTok or look at a feed on Instagram or will look at Twitter.
Some TV channels.
Stupid people, and stupid people that will look at stupid people on other TV channels lying to them about the big line about this. Like, they will spread this lie, and it'll be these women whose lives will continue to be in danger. Let's bring in right now MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissmann. He's the co-host of the MSNBC podcast prosecuting Donald Trump. Also with us, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC contributor Barbara McQuade. She is, of course, the co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. Barbara, let's start with you. Mika has asked, since this verdict came down, is this going to stop him? Is this going to stop Rudy Giuliani from lying?
And others.
What are the consequences? And right now, there don't appear to be any consequences because Rudy just keeps on lying.
Yeah, that's why I think this particular lawsuit is really clever. They've already got $148 million as a judgment, so they're not looking for more money. What they really want is for Rudy just to shut the hell up. And so by seeking a court order, an injunction to stop spreading these lies, one of the things that the parties could do, if he continues to do it, is to seek a contempt order. So once they've got that injunction demanding that he stop, ordering him to stop, if he fails to do so, he could be held in contempt of court. And, of course, with contempt, a judge has the ability to jail someone until they comply for up to 18 months. So that may be what they're seeking here, is the ability to hold that over his head, and maybe that will provide some disincentive to finally cause him to stop spreading these lies.
Andrew, he's sure not stopping his lies just yet. Let's talk about that $148 million, though, that he's already been ordered to pay. How is that going to work? Rudy Giuliani does not have $148 million to his name. We certainly all believe. So explain to the viewers here, how much should they actually expect to receive? What are the mechanics of this payout from the former mayor of New York City?
Absolutely. Great question. Well, it's worth remembering the reason that Rudy Giuliani is in the situation he's in terms of liability and damages is that he refused to participate in court-ordered discovery. So he did not give to the plaintiffs, although the plaintiffs gave to him all of the documentation that needs to be given in a civil case. That included any information about his financial condition. And so finding his assets is going to be a challenge. But as Barb said, at this point, what is going to happen is the plaintiffs are going to be tenacious about getting information from Rudy Giuliani about the whereabouts of all of his assets. As we know, he has an apartment he's trying to sell for millions of dollars in New York City. That's one of the assets. If Rudy Giuliani, though, continues to violate court orders to turn over that information, Barb has it exactly right. The one tool that Judge Beryl Howell has not yet used is jailing Rudy Giuliani, which can happen if he goes into contempt. That can happen either for violating an injunction, which is now being sought by the plaintiffs, or for failing to turn over the location of his assets, which the plaintiffs are entitled to. So stay tuned here for more action happening in this case.
Once Omika, as Andrew and Barb both said, he could end up in jail if he insists on continuing to lie against court orders if that injunction is put in place. I've got to say, you've got a lot of things going on in Georgia. Of course, he also faces significant jail time in Georgia, as does Mark Meadows, who continues to try to delay this trial.
Look, I think women like E. Jean Carroll and these two women at the center of the Rudy Giuliani defamation, now second suit, are heroes, because you can look at the big lie and all the big ramifications of a second Trump term or what Trump has done to our democracy. But it starts with fixing one lie, with taking one small step. And these women are holding on to their truth. They might not mean anything to people across the country, but you should take a look at them, because what they're doing is standing up for...
Let's be clear. It's not their truth. It's the truth.
Correct.
Rudy Giuliani lied
mentioned
about them. That's their truth. So, yeah, talked about Mark Meadows. We're going to talk to our expert panel about Mark Meadows and whether he's going to be able to continue delaying, I guess, to avoid the trial and avoid jail time. We'll talk more about that when we get back.